Welcome to Hannity, and tonight we start with this Fox News alert. Project Freedom is now officially paused after successfully escorting commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, President Trump just announced a temporary halt to the operation amid major progress on a peace deal. Now, the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports, that does remain in full effect, meaning the regime, or what's left of it, is still losing $400 to $500 million a day. And tonight, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and the Commander-in-Chief, President Trump, all have a clear message for the fractured so-called leaders in Iran that their reign of terror is coming to an end one way or the other. Now, coming up, we'll bring you the latest details from the Middle East. Plus, we will check in with America's ambassador to the UN. Michael Waltz will be with us. Bret Baier also joins us tonight. And House Majority Leader, a survivor of left-wing political violence himself, Steve Scalise. He will respond to the Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker, who is now victim-blaming President Trump after he survived yet another assassination attempt. Pritzker, who compared President Trump many times to Adolf Hitler over and over again, telling his deranged far-left base, because he wants to be president, that we are living through the second coming of Nazi Germany. He is not concerned about his own deranged rhetoric that could easily, by the way, be interpreted as a call to arms, especially by those that are sick and more susceptible to the idiocy of the radical left. But we begin in the Strait of Hormuz tonight with Project Freedom. On Truth Social, President Trump made the following announcement, quote, based on the request of Pakistan and other countries, the tremendous military success that we have had during the campaign against the country of Iran, and additionally, the fact that great progress has been made toward a complete and final agreement with representatives of Iran, we have mutually agreed that while the blockade will remain in full force and effect, Project Freedom, the movement of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, will be paused for a short period of time to see whether or not the agreement can be finalized and signed. Okay, so the president, again, showing he's going the extra mile, being committed to peace, but let's see if Iran really means it. So far, their word has been meaningless. Now, the U.S. does remain, the Navy remains ready and able to restart Project Freedom and, frankly, Epic Fury at any time, which has been a huge success. Take a look.
2 U.S. commercial ships, along with American destroyers, have already safely transited the strait, showing the lane is clear. We know the Iranians are embarrassed by this fact. They said they control the strait. They do not.
Now, keep in mind, this was a defensive operation, and in a rare press conference from the White House briefing room today, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, did emphasize that the U.S. has concluded Operation Epic Fury to give peace a chance. Take a look.
Operation Epic Fury is concluded. We achieved the objectives of that operation. I'm not going to, we're not cheering for an additional situation to occur. We would prefer the path of peace. What the president would prefer is a deal. He would prefer to sit down, work out a memorandum of understanding for future negotiations that touches on all the key topics that have to be addressed, a full opening of the strait so the world can get back to normal. And he preferred that be negotiated through the route that Steve and Jared have been working and that all of us have been supporting. That's the route he prefers. That is so far not the route that Iran has chosen.
Now, of course, Iran now has a huge incentive to agree to our terms and make peace. Operation Epic Fury might be over for the moment, but the U.S. blockade is going strong, and Iran is running out of storage space for their oil. They may soon be capping their wells, which will have long, devastating economic impact. Take a look.
This is what Iran is saying. We will shut down the straits. No one can go through. No country in the world can go through unless we allow you to go through, and you have to pay us. But our ships can go through, meaning the Iranian ships, as much as they want. That's crazy. Who would agree to that? So how are we going to have a situation where they get to close the straits to everybody, and the only people who are allowed to go through there 100% without paying anything are the Iranians? If you do that, they'll keep the straits closed forever. They're trying to make this some new normal. Okay, under no circumstances can we ever allow them to normalize the fact that they get to blow up commercial ships and put mines in the water. So the response to that is, we're going to blockade your ships. If everyone's ships are not getting out, your ships are not getting out either.
Now, this is critical leverage for the U.S. Now, if the past 5 decades taught us anything, it is that Iran's radical Islamo-fascist leaders cannot be trusted. Take a look.
I don't know of any country in the world where there's a bigger difference between the people and the people who run the country. Okay, this country is run by radical Shia clerics. And that's not what Iran and the Iranian people are. Now, they may be Shia, but they're not radicals and they're not clerics, and they just want a normal life and a regular life, and in many ways a very cosmopolitan country with an incredible history. It's not that they're able to withstand pressure, it's that they don't care that their people are suffering. You understand, right? There's a difference between we can withstand pressure and we actually don't care. Now, I think there are people in their system that care more than others. You know, some of the elected people that you see, some of the people you see on television with the suits on, you know, those guys care because they know at the end of the day they have to live in the reality. And then you have another element of their government, the clerics, the IRGC types, who probably are more immune to that and care less. They're more interested in regime survival at all costs.
Now, let us not lose sight of America's clear, consistent goal as it relates to Iran. No nukes. Not now, not ever. Take a look.
If Iran had a nuclear weapon, and they decided to close the straits and make our gas prices like $9 a gallon or $8 a gallon, we wouldn't be able to do anything about it because they have a nuclear weapon. And a nuclear-armed Iran could do whatever the hell they want with the straits, and there's nothing anyone would be able to do about it. And that's one of the many reasons, apart from like the massive loss of life in a nuclear strike, why Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. I mean, so this is an example of if they had a nuclear weapon, they closed the straits and they would tell the world, what are you going to do about it? We have a nuclear weapon. We can attack you with it. That's the world none of us want to leave behind. It won't happen under this president's watch. Primary responsibility for this Project Freedom is on the United States because we're the only country that can project power in that part of the world the way we're doing now. We're the only ones that can do it, and we're going to do it as a favor to the world.
All right, thanks for watching. Check out my new podcast, Hanging Out with me, Sean Hannity. The big interviews, the debates you won't get anywhere else. Like and subscribe for new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday.